"You'll need to clear your office by Friday," my father said, standing behind my desk in my chair, with his feet up on the edge of the walnut surface I'd had custom built. "Your brother needs a proper workspace. The spare bedroom at our place has bad light." I had just driven 4 hours from Toronto to Barrie in a January snowstorm because my mother had called saying it was urgent, that my father had chest pains, that the family needed me. I'd white-knuckled it up the 400 through blowing snow and 18-wheelers, pulled into the parking lot of my own building at 9:30 at night, and walked upstairs to find him sitting in my chair like he'd been there for years. My assistant, a 22-year-old named Benny who looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor, was standing near the door gripping his lanyard. "I'm sorry," he mouthed when my father wasn't looking. "They said you'd called ahead. Your mum had your key card." She had a key card because I'd given her one the previous winter when I was traveling for 3 weeks and needed someone to water my office plant. One plant. A pothos I'd had since university. "Benny," I said, keeping my voice even, "go home, I'll see you Monday." He left fast. I didn't blame him. My name is Zoe. I'm 31 years old. I own a small but profitable event production company in Toronto. We do corporate galas, brand launches, charitable fundraisers, the kind of events where someone spends $40,000 on centerpieces and calls it tasteful. I started at 24 with $1,200 and a laptop I bought refurbished off Kijiji. I have 6 full-time staff, a roster of 30 freelancers, and an office lease on King Street West that I am deeply embarrassingly proud of. It took me 7 years of 18-hour days, eating peanut butter crackers over spreadsheets at midnight, cancelling every vacation I ever tried to take. My brother is 34. His name is Scott. He has a business idea roughly every 8 months. He's had a meal kit subscription box, a cannabis beverage brand before the regulations made it impossible, an app for rating local tradespeople, and most recently, a premium men's grooming experience, a barbershop in Sudbury that lasted 11 months before the lease ate him alive. Every single one of these ventures was funded partially or entirely by my parents. And when my parents ran out of money to give him, the phone calls to me started. I had told them no, firmly, clearly, twice. The second time, my mother cried and my father said I'd changed and that success had made me cold. After that, the calls stopped. Not just the calls asking for money. All the calls, 8 months of silence, no birthday text, nothing at Christmas. I sent a card anyway because I'm apparently a masochist, and it came back unopened. And then, in January, my father had chest pains. Except he didn't. I could see that now. He looked fine, better than fine. He'd found my good coffee, the single-origin Ethiopian beans I ordered from a roaster on Dundas, and was drinking it from my favourite mug, the one that said "not a morning person" that my best friend Claudette had given me years ago. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "Kitchen. She needed to lie down after the drive." There was no kitchen in my office. There was a small staff room with a mini fridge and a kettle. "The chest pains," I said. "Hospital cleared you." He waved a hand. It was more of a pressure thing, stress-related. The doctor said rest. "Right." I set my bag down on the couch. "So there's no medical emergency." "There's a family emergency." He finally looked at me directly. My father has the kind of face that defaults to disappointed, heavy brows, downturned mouth, and he wore it now like he always did when he was about to ask for something. "Your brother needs help, Zoe. Real help this time. There's been a real emergency every time. This is different." He swung his feet down off my desk, which I appreciated about as much as I could appreciate anything in that moment. "He owes money, significant money, to people who aren't patient." I felt something go still inside me. Not surprise. Recognition. This was the conversation we'd been circling for 8 months. "How much?" I said. It wasn't a question. $86,000. He said it the way you say a phone number. $86,000. My brother had borrowed $86,000 from what I would later learn was a private lender operating out of an office park in Mississauga, The kind of outfit that charges 40% interest and sends someone to your house when you miss a payment. They had, in fact, sent someone to Scott's apartment. He'd called my parents from the parking lot of a Tim Hortons at 11 at night, shaking, and they had driven through the same snowstorm I'd driven through to reach him, which was, I was now realizing, also why I was here. They'd been planning this visit for days. I don't have $86,000 sitting in an account, I said. You have a line of credit. That line of credit is collateral for my operating costs. If I pull from it, I'm in breach of my lease terms. My father made the face, the patient teacher face, the one where he tilts his head slightly and breathes through his nose like he's dealing with someone who simply doesn't understand how the world works. Zoe, he said slowly, we're not asking you to bankrupt yourself. We're asking you to help your family. That's what family does. My mother appeared in the doorway then. She looked tired, genuinely, and for a half second I felt the pull of it. The old reflex, the daughter-shaped thing inside me that wanted to fix whatever was making her face look like that. She had her coat still on. She hadn't taken off her boots, and there were little puddles forming on my hardwood. She's going to argue about it, my father said without looking at her. I'm not arguing, I said. I'm explaining why it's not possible. We raised you, my mother said quietly. It wasn't angry. That was the thing about my mother. She never raised her voice. She said the worst things in the softest register. We gave you everything we had. We drove you to your swim meets. We bought you your first laptop. I paid you back for that laptop. You paid back the hardware, not the sacrifice. She moved into the room and sat down on the couch. Do you know what your father and I gave up? The trip to Portugal we've been saving for. 3 years of RRSP contributions. You don't remember, but we do. There it was. I had been waiting for it without knowing I was waiting for it, and when it arrived I felt a horrible, hollow calm. They had been keeping a ledger. Every swim meet, every Respond contribution, every year of tuition they'd partially helped with. All of it had been running interest in the back of their minds, waiting for me to have enough liquidity to make withdrawal worth their while. You're describing parenting, I said. You're describing the legal and moral obligation you took on when you decided to have children. We went above and beyond. So did I. When Scott's barbershop was failing, I lent him $11,000. I gave it, actually. I never asked for it back. That was different. How? Verbuchenzurtig. My father stood up. Because this time his safety is at stake. This isn't a failed business. This is a man who had a photo of his car taken by people who collect debts for a living. Do you understand what that means? I understood exactly what it meant. It meant my brother had borrowed money from predatory lenders, had failed to repay it, and was now using his family as a human shield. I need to check my accounts, I said, picking up my bag. I can't make a decision of this scale standing in a snowstorm at 10 o'clock at night. Give me until morning. The lender wants a call by end of week, my father said. It's Tuesday. I have until Friday. I looked at him steadily. I'm not running anywhere. I'll be at my apartment. You have my number. What I didn't say, that I had no intention of giving them $86,000. What I also didn't say, that I had already, in the 40 seconds since my father said the number, started thinking about what I actually could do. I drove to my apartment in the distillery district, made myself a tea I didn't drink, and sat on my couch staring at the wall until almost 1 in the morning. Then I texted Claudette. Claudette Moran has been my best friend since we were assigned adjacent lockers in grade 9. She is now a forensic accountant with a firm on Bay Street, which means she spends her professional life finding money that people have hidden, tracking funds through shell accounts, and appearing in court to explain complex financial instruments to judges. She has also, on 2 separate occasions, helped me renegotiate contracts with vendors who were overcharging me, which she did purely for the intellectual pleasure of it. She is the most competent person I have ever met, and she has never once asked me for anything. She called, instead of texting, at 1:15 in the morning, because she'd been at a work dinner and was in a cab. Okay, she said when I'd explained. First question, this lender, do you have a name? I didn't, but Scott had mentioned the office park in Mississauga and the name of the person who'd come to his apartment, and Claudette wrote it down. Give me tomorrow morning, she said. Don't agree to anything, don't transfer anything. And Zoe, don't let them stay at your apartment. They had not asked to stay at my apartment, but when I checked my messages there was a text from my mother asking for the door code. I didn't reply. Claudette called at 9:15 the next morning. I was on my second coffee watching the frost on the window of the cafe downstairs. Okay, she said. So the lender is a company called Meridian Capital Solutions, which is not a bank, not regulated by OSFI, and is currently the subject of a complaint filed with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. They operate in a grey zone, technically legal, predatory in practice. Your brother's debt is $86,000 principal, but with their penalty interest structure, they've told him it's climbed to around 94. He told my parents 86. He likely doesn't understand how the penalties compound, or he does, and didn't want to say. She paused. Here's the thing. Meridian operates like this because most of their borrowers can't pay and they know it. Their actual preference is a discounted settlement. They would rather take 60 cents on the dollar in cash today than chase $94,000 through a borrower with no assets. So they'd settle. With the right approach, absolutely. I've seen this structure before. If someone contacts them directly, not emotionally, not as a family member, but as someone looking to purchase the debt note outright as a distressed asset, they'll deal. I let that sit for a second. Purchase the debt note. You become the creditor, not the bank of last resort, not the sympathetic sister. The creditor. I sat with that for a long moment, watching a streetcar go by on King. What would it cost me? Somewhere between $50,000 and $58,000 if I make the call. They know me, or know my firm. I handled a case 2 years ago that involved one of their sister companies. She let that hang, and I knew what it meant. She had information they didn't want aired. Do it, I said. Use whatever leverage you have. I'll wire you the funds from my line of credit today. You understand what this means, though. You'd own Scott's debt, not forgive it. Own it. I understand. Your parents won't, at first. I know. Okay. I could hear her smiling slightly. I'll make the call now. We spent the next 2 hours on a shared document, me at the cafe, her between calls at her office. We drafted not a check, not a transfer, but a debt acknowledgement and repayment agreement. It was dense with terms I understood, and terms I was learning as I read them. There was a personal guarantee clause. There was a provision that any default triggered immediate lien rights against assets, including real property. My parents owned a house in Barrie, a semi-detached on a quiet street they'd bought in 1998 for $240,000, and which the current market had valued, in their most recent property assessment, at just over $700,000. Scott lived in a rental. He had a vehicle, that was it. The lien would cover the house if it came to that. I hoped it wouldn't. Claudette called Meridian at 11:30. She called me back at 12:02. Done, she said. $53,500. Wire is pending. As of 3 o'clock this afternoon, Meridian is out. You are the note holder. Thank you, I said. And then, because it needed to be said, I owe you dinner. Many dinners. You owe me nothing, she said. Just don't let them do this to you again. I fixed my hair in the bathroom mirror at the cafe before I drove to my office. I looked tired but composed. I did not practice a sad face. I had tried the sad face on the drive over, and it felt dishonest in a way I didn't want. What I felt wasn't defeat. It was something cooler. I was a woman walking into a meeting she had already won. My parents were still there when I arrived. They had, in the night, made themselves at home in a way that told me this had been planned for longer than I'd known. My mother had reorganized the staff room. My father had moved the client chair from across my desk to beside it. Scott had arrived sometime in the morning. He was sitting on the couch eating from a bag of chips he'd apparently found in someone's desk, scrolling his phone, looking pale and ashamed, and also, somehow, irritated, which is the particular talent of people who've been rescued so many times they've started to resent the process. He looked up when I came in. "You going to help me?" "We're going to talk," I said. "All of us." I pulled my desk chair back to where it belonged and sat down. I folded my hands on the desk. My parents sat across from me. Scott remained on the couch, which was fine. The conversation I was about to have didn't require his full attention yet. "I've looked at the accounts," I said. "I can't simply transfer this amount without it being flagged. For a personal payment of this size going out of a corporate account, CRA requires documentation. It needs to be structured as a formal transaction, a debt acquisition, or it looks like embezzlement of business funds." My father leaned forward. "So structure it that way." "I am, but for it to be clean from an audit standpoint, I need a paper record. You'll need to sign a document acknowledging the debt, Scott's inability to pay, and your position as guarantors." I pulled the folder from my bag and set it on the desk. "It's standard. It establishes that this is a secured business transaction, not a gift. The difference matters for how I claim it." My mother looked at the folder. "How much does this save you?" "Approximately $22,000 in tax treatment," I said. "It's the difference between a deductible distressed asset acquisition and a non-deductible personal transfer." My father picked up the folder. He did not open it. He turned it over once, put it down. He was 3 days into stress, and relief was right in front of him, and the mention of a tax saving made him feel like he was in on a good deal rather than on the wrong side of one. "So we sign this and the debt is cleared." "The debt is cleared," I said. I placed my phone on the corner of the desk, propped against my pen holder. "I also need a brief recorded acknowledgement for the compliance file. My accountant requires verbal confirmation for any transfer over $10,000. It's an anti-money laundering thing. I just need you to state the basic facts, the amount, that it belongs to Scott, that you can't cover it yourselves. 30 seconds. My father looked at my phone, then at Scott, then at the folder. "Fine," he said. "Let's just get this done." I pressed record. "Just confirm your name and that the debt of approximately $86,000 was incurred by your son, and that neither you nor my mother currently have the liquid assets to settle it." He looked into the lens of my phone with the expression of a man who thinks he's at the end of a very long road. "I'm Kenneth, and this debt belongs to my son Scott. We don't have the cash to cover it. That's why we're here." He cleared his throat. "We've always supported this family. We supported Zoe when she needed it, her first lease deposit, half a semester of tuition in second year, the car loan she couldn't get on her own at 23. He was building his case for the ledger, establishing that they had sacrificed. I let him finish. "And just for the audit history," I said, keeping my voice very even, "since they may look at previous interfamily transfers, there was that respect amount that was redirected when I was 19, the education savings. If you could just confirm what happened there, it establishes that family funds have moved before." It was a gamble. It was the biggest gamble of the whole night. He didn't even pause. He was too deep in relief, too convinced he was doing paperwork, too certain the check was already written. "We used Zoe's respect to cover Scott's first business setup costs. Both kids benefited from what we built as a family. It all evens out. $14,000. That was what had been in that respect when I was 19. I had discovered it was gone when I tried to access it to pay for a semester at Ryerson. The bank teller had been kind about it. I had sat in my car in the parking lot on Young Street for 40 minutes. I had then driven home, gotten a part-time job at a restaurant on Bloor, taken out a student loan, and never spoken about it to anyone except Claudette, 6 years later, over 2 bottles of wine. He had just confessed to it on camera while smiling because he thought it was helping me build a paper trail. I slid the folder across the desk. "Sign on the guarantor line, both of you and Scott." They didn't read it. My father signed, my mother signed. Scott leaned over from the couch and scrawled his name without getting up. My phone buzzed. I turned it over and read the message from Claudette. Transfer cleared. Meridian confirms. You're the note holder. The wire is complete, I said. My father sat back with the exhale of a man who has been holding his breath for days. Thank God. The wire went to me, I said. I purchased the debt note from Meridian this morning. I'm your creditor now. Silence. Then my father said slowly, What? Meridian accepted a discounted settlement. I bought the note. The clause you signed, page 3, section 4, states that in the event of a failure to repay within 30 days, the guarantor's primary residence becomes subject to lien. I turned my phone so he could see Claudette's message. The default clock started when you signed. My mother made a sound I had never heard her make. My father stood up. This is theft. This is a secured debt agreement signed by 3 adults who were given the opportunity to read it. I picked up my phone and ended the recording. If you want to contest it, you'll need a lawyer, but before you do, I'd suggest remembering that you just confirmed on video that you redirected my ResPact funds without my knowledge or consent. In Ontario, that's fraud. My lawyer would be very interested in that recording. Scott stood up from the couch. His face had gone the particular grey of someone who is understood, about 30 seconds too late, the exact shape of the room they're standing in. Zoe. The debt is real, I said. I'm not your enemy, I'm your creditor. Make your payments and the house stays. Default, and I follow the agreement. I stood up. I'd like you all to leave now. This is a place of business. My father said several things after that. My mother cried, genuinely this time, I think. Scott said I was unrecognizable. He said I had become someone he didn't know. He said I had let money change me. I pressed the silent alert on my desk. The property manager, a retired RCMP officer named Doug, who had the quiet energy of someone who had seen everything and found most of it boring, appeared within 2 minutes. My parents and Scott were escorted out without a scene. Doug was good at that. I sat in my office for a long time after they left. The pothos were still on the windowsill. The coffee grounds from the Ethiopian beans were still in the filter. 3 weeks later, Scott began making payments. Small ones, at first $300 on the first Friday of the month, sent via e-transfer with no message. Then $500, my parents called once, from a number I didn't recognize because they'd borrowed someone's phone, probably figuring I'd blocked them. I hadn't. I picked up. My father asked if I'd really do it. File the lien, force the sale. I told them I had no interest in taking their house. I had every interest in being repaid. He said that wasn't how family worked. I said I'd been operating under a different definition of family for a while now, and I thought it was time we were honest about that. He hung up. Claudette came over that Saturday and we ordered Thai food and watched a movie neither of us paid attention to. She asked if I felt like a villain. I thought about it for a long time. I told her I felt like someone who'd finally read the contract. I keep thinking about that parking lot on Yonge Street. 19 years old, sitting in my car after the bank teller had shown me the withdrawal slip, knowing the money was gone and knowing exactly where it had gone. I didn't scream. I didn't call them. I just sat there for 40 minutes, and then I drove home and got a job. That moment made me who I am more than anything else that came before or after it. Not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, it wasn't, but because of what I chose to do with it. I could have gone back to them. I could have made them explain themselves and accepted whatever story they gave me and let it close over like it never happened. A lot of people do that. It's easier in the short term, but I didn't. I took a student loan, I worked doubles on weekends, and I built something from the parts of myself they hadn't gotten to yet. What I've come to understand is that the choices we make when no one is watching, when we're broke and exhausted and 20 years old and the people who were supposed to protect us have just proven they won't. Those choices are the truest measure of who we're becoming, not the big dramatic moments, the quiet ones, the ones where you decide whether to fold or keep going. Claudette always says the most important skill she learned wasn't accounting, it was how to read a room. how to understand what's actually happening versus what someone is telling you is happening. She brought that skill to a cigar bar in Fort Lauderdale, and I brought it to a desk in my own office. Neither of us arrived at that knowledge easily. It came from years of paying attention, of being wrong and correcting, of learning that the world rewards people who think clearly under pressure more than it rewards people who simply want something very badly. I'm not proud of every feeling I had in that office. There was satisfaction in watching my father's face change when he understood what he'd signed, and I'd be lying if I said that satisfaction was entirely clean. But I am proud of the fact that I waited, that I didn't act out of anger in the parking lot, or on the phone at 1 a.m, or in the first 5 minutes when I walked in and found him in my chair. Patience isn't passivity. Sometimes patience is the hardest form of strength there is, the kind that holds itself together long enough to act with precision instead of just noise. Scott is still making payments. They come in every month, small and consistent. He hasn't called. My parents haven't called since that last conversation when my father hung up. I've made peace with the silence. I spent 8 months in it before and built a company. I know what silence is worth. The thing I want people to take from this, if they take anything, is that protecting yourself isn't selfish. Knowing your own worth, documenting your own history, refusing to rewrite the past to make other people comfortable, those aren't cold things. They're how you stay honest. They're how you stay standing. And sometimes, staying standing is the most decent thing you can do for yourself and for everyone watching who needed proof it was possible. I finally read the contract. Turns out I'd written half of it myself, years ago, in a parking lot on Yonge Street, alone.